Here are 3 true scary stories that take place in the dark. Before beginning this video, I want to recommend that if you haven't already, after watching this video, please use the links provided to visit Hero to Villain's channel to check out the other half of our collaboration. It includes 2 original stories read by me that haven't appeared on this channel. Enjoy! Number 1. Time for bed. I'm definitely a workaholic. I'm one of those sorts of guys who very often stays at the office hours past when I'm scheduled. When I'm on the way home, it is usually very dark outside and there is little to no traffic. I tend to go home, eat something really quickly, and slip into bed. Then, the next morning, I start the pattern all over again. I live alone, so it really isn't a problem. I don't have a wife, or girlfriend, or even a dog waiting for me at home. So no one really complains. I do have my own house, though. It's a beautiful townhouse in a really upscale neighborhood in the city. Anyway, the night that this story happened, I was working really late at night. I had gotten myself really invested in a project, and I completely lost track of time. I was hit with a sudden sleepiness, and emitted a long yawn. When I eventually looked up at the clock, I noticed that it was nearly midnight. I was mildly shocked because, although I did often stay really late at work, this was nearly 7 hours after quitting time. I decided to put my work away and get my butt home. Driving home was rather dangerous, actually. I had worked so hard that I was exhausted, and it was difficult even keeping my eyes open. It was really cold outside, but I still went ahead and rolled my window down, in the hopes that the wind would keep me awake. When I got to the house, I just came into the house all tuckered out. Normally, I would take a shower before bed and get into my pajamas, but I just didn't have it in me. I just kicked my clothes off and threw them on the couch. I didn't even turn on any of the lights in the house. My eyes were so heavy that I figured it would just hurt my eyes to turn on the lights. So I trudged through the house, up the stairs, and made it into my bedroom. I swear that at this point, my eyes were just closed. I couldn't even open them up a little bit. I flopped down on my queen-size bed, and I didn't even bother covering up at first. I felt myself begin to doze off quickly. But something strange then happened. My bed shook just a little bit. At first, my mind just dismissed it as some sort of sleep consciousness thing. But then I felt my bed shake again, and I heard a shuffling noise as well. Although I had been struggling to stay awake for a while, I quickly woke up at that point. Looking towards the other side of my bed, I saw a dark figure standing between my bed and the far wall. At that point, I was completely awake. I screamed a bit and jumped up, sort of like when you see a scary bug or a snake and you have to jump away from it. I bumped into my nightstand and I reached out and touched my lamp. It was one of those touch lamps. When the light came on in the room, I saw what had been in my bed. An old, dirty, and stringy homeless man was standing in my room. He had stripped himself down to his filthy underwear and must have been sleeping in my bed. I was simultaneously disgusted and scared at the same time. I wasn't sure how to defend myself, so I grabbed my lamp and it turned off. The man tried running around the bed to get out of the room. I guess I should have let him go, but I just couldn't. I threw the damn lamp at him, hitting him and knocking him over. I then ran out of my room, down the stairs, and grabbed my phone and called 911. The police came and picked up the homeless man. He had broken into my house through the back door. It was so cold out that night that he just couldn't take it outside. He had broken into my house a couple hours before I came home. He figured it was late at night and nobody was there, so he didn't expect anyone to come home. He broke my back door open, ate some food, stripped down, and went to sleep in my bed. I would have noticed this if I hadn't been so sleepy. Number 2. The second story. My wife and I have a really unique setup in our house. My wife is a strict vegetarian, and I wouldn't give up meat to save my life. She also really doesn't drink, and I like to have some beer every day when I get home from work. She's so strict about this that she actually worries about food and stuff getting mixed together. It's sort of obsessive compulsive, I guess. So in order to just not let her worry about it, I let her use the kitchen refrigerator for her food. I bought a second refrigerator for my food and beer, and I kept it out in the garage. I know it must seem sort of weird for a husband and wife to have their food completely separate from each other, but I really never thought about it. We didn't often have meals together. Rather, we would just eat when we felt like it. For my wife, at least, eating was much less of a social thing than it was simply a necessity. Plus, I tended to eat later into the night, and she wouldn't touch a single thing after 7 p.m. For most nights, I just got used to going over to the garage door and didn't even bother turning the light on. I'd use the hallway light to see my way over to the refrigerator, open it up, grab what I want, and then go back into the house. I would do this over and over. I didn't use the 2-car garage for much of anything. My wife and I parked our cars in the driveway, and I had 2 old motorcycles and a broken down Ford Mustang, along with some other boxes stored in the garage. So one night, my wife had already had her food and she went to bed pretty early. It was around 10 o'clock when I realized that I really hadn't had anything to eat. Again, this wasn't too out of the ordinary. Since my wife and I really didn't eat together, I often forgot to eat until it was pretty late. I was watching some scary movies on Netflix since my wife was in bed, and usually she didn't care to watch that stuff. So I got up and went over to the garage door, opened it, and went to grab some food. Now, I can't explain it, but for some reason, I felt very uneasy while I was in the garage. I had never felt that way before in there. But it was a very overwhelming, scared feeling. I chalked it up to the fact that maybe the movie I was watching was scarier than I had thought it was. I quickly grabbed what I wanted, slammed the refrigerator door shut, and made my way back into the house. I fixed myself the food, got into my chair, and got back to watching my movie. When it was over, I decided that I wasn't really tired. I was enjoying myself. So I decided to go ahead and watch another movie. But first, I decided that I would grab myself a couple of beers with which to enhance my enjoyment of the upcoming film. On my way over to the garage, I began remembering my apprehension from before. It was again odd because I watched scary movies all the time, and since my wife didn't watch them, I was usually watching them alone. It had been years before I actually got freaked out by one of them. I tried to be bold and just go about my business. But when I got to the garage door, I told myself I wasn't going to chicken out. I opened the door, left it open, and made my way over to the refrigerator. While I was holding the door open, I began to get really freaked out. I couldn't explain why again. But I was so timid at the time that I was hyper-aware of what was going on around me. I got so worked up thinking that someone was in the garage with me. It was the movie, I know, making me just scared. But it was made worse when the garage door to the house slowly shut on me. So rather than grab my beer, I jogged over to the garage door and quickly flipped on the garage light. The garage lights were bright, and since I never used them, they immediately hurt my eyes, and I groaned. But almost simultaneously with my groan, I heard another groan. I rubbed my eyes and looked over at the far side of the garage. I didn't see anything, and at first I thought it was just my imagination. So I walked over and began looking around things. I looked behind the boxes and behind the car. I didn't see anyone, and I just chalked the groan up to my imagination. But on my way back over to the door, I glanced in the back seat of the Mustang, and then jumped when I saw someone laying in the small back seat of the car, hunched down and trying to avoid being seen. This time, I just ran quickly over to the door. I got in the house and locked the door. The garage opener was inside the house, so whoever was in the garage could not get out. I called the police, and they came and got the guy out of my garage. They found a box cutter and a razor blade on him. But that's not the scariest part. The part that got me the worst was that the man had apparently broken into my garage 2 months beforehand. He had been living in there the entire time, surviving off food from my refrigerator. Every single night that I had walked into that garage without turning the light on, this guy was in there with me. That has been hard to get over. Number 3. Being the third story reached. There's nothing worse than taking a wrong turn. Well, let me rephrase that. There's nothing worse than taking a turn deliberately, only to realize that it was eventually the wrong turn. I was driving home from work one night. I always get bored to death driving the same way over and over again. So occasionally, just to keep my mind busy, I would try to take a new road and try to find my way home. I live in a pretty rural area too, so sometimes this can get me pretty lost. And this time, it definitely did get me lost. For people who haven't ever really lived out in the country, you might not know how positively frightening it can be to drive down an old dirt road, through the hills, with no street lights, surrounded by trees, in the dark. You can't always drive particularly fast either, because of plenty of sharp turns. The road I turned on that night in question had another problem as well. After a very short while, it quickly narrowed down to one lane. This made the ride even more difficult because it only gave me 2 options: drive in reverse and get back to the road I had been driving on, or drive forward and turn around in whatever driveway this road eventually led to. I wish I could explain this in a way that truly conveyed how frightening it was. It was pitch black, and even my headlights only lit up a small portion of the area to the front of me. Everything only slightly up ahead was dark, and everything behind me and to the sides was dark. The headlights only lit up so much in front of me, and I had to drive very slowly for fear of running into something dangerous. Everything else was dark. I was driving deep one way into the hills, and the side of the road was covered with darkness and the unknown. After much driving, the road took a sudden turn, and my worst fear came true. It wasn't a driveway. I turned right into a metal barrier gate. And like I said, there wasn't a driveway behind it, but I could see there was room beyond the gate to turn around my car. So, Completely scared out of my wits, I pulled up close to the gate. Getting out, and of course leaving my door open, I slowly walked over to the gate. I grabbed it and swung it open. I rushed back quickly to my car and slammed the door. It gave me enough space to drive through and turn around in the area behind the gate. I slowly drove in, turned around, and then pulled past the barrier gate. At that point, I should have just driven off and left the barrier gate open. But I'm the sort of person who just can't do that. I opened the gate. I felt obligated to close it. So I looked behind my car, and I could barely see anything behind me. My taillights created a small amount of light, but it was not nearly enough to be able to see what I was doing. I didn't have a flashlight either. I should have left. But instead, I opened the door of my car. I thought by leaving the door open, I would get more light. It really didn't help, though. Slowly, I began walking back to the gate. I was practically blind. I kept my hand on my car as I moved back, hoping my eyes would adjust to the light. They adjusted enough for me to see the gate. So I walked slowly over to the gate. I reached out and put my hand on the gate, prepared to pull the gate closed. No sooner than I touched the gate, but then I heard very clearly, and if someone was speaking directly into my ear, a voice said, "Get the hell out of here now." I didn't bother with the gate. Hell, my fight or flight kicked in for the first time in my life, and I ran to the car without even having any control over my body. I ran, jumped in the car, slammed and locked the door, and hit the gas. As I started driving, I was much more scared than I had been even outside of the car. My mind began playing tricks on me, and I began wondering if someone was in my back seat. But I was too scared to look. I kept expecting someone to jump out in front of my car at any second, but I didn't stop. I just kept driving until I got back to the main road. I turned on it and took the safe way home. Of course, by the time I got home, I looked in the back seat, and of course no one was there. My uncle has always told me to keep out of the hills. He said there were some really unpleasant, unsavory, and very dangerous people out there. I used to think he was full of it. I don't anymore. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I want to start by including a link here for the second half of my previous collaboration with Hero to Villain. Since the videos didn't come out at the same time, some of you may have missed his video, so please make sure to check this out on his channel at the link provided. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please hit the button next to the tabby so you'll be informed of new content. Please share this video if you liked it, and feel free to follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter. I want to give a shout out to a channel that has really captured my interest over the past few days. I can't tell you exactly what it is I like about it, but I've been very captivated by Guy with a Box for a Face. It's not a horror channel. I'm not even sure how to describe it, but it's very interesting and creative, and I encourage you to check it out. It's definitely not for everyone, but on the off chance that some of you may enjoy it, I thought I would include it. Links are here and in the description. Please remember to send in stories if you would like them narrated. I definitely need more supernatural stories for my Halloween special. Please email your stories to the address in the description. And as always, please make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding. Good night.